ठीक है, so just let him know and let your father know also, so that you know, you can finalize and you can formally begin and decide the days that you want and the timings that you want with him, inshallah. Because yes, the papers are still in May 21, but the time is less. You don't think that you have a lot of time. So inshallah, make sure that you begin and keep the wheel rolling for physics, even if you have, you know, chemistry and bio, inshallah, upcoming October, November. All my prayers, best wishes and du'as for you, Hamza. Stay blessed.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर।
जी वालेकुम अस्सलाम, कैसी हैं राबिया?
फाइन सर।
Okay. How's your school classes going? कहाँ तक कर लिया cover?
सर बायो में तो अभी रेस्पिरेशन किया है सर।
Okay, you're done with respiration, the entire topic?
Yes, we're going to start photosynthesis.
Okay. आपके LGS से कितनी टी फैकल्टी गई है उधर ISL में?
सर बहुत सारी।
ये this reminds me of my time. SciCas में back in when I was in my O-level days, इसी तरह ये स्कूल खुला था शेरपा के सामने, अब बंद हो गया मेरे ख्याल से। लाहौर स्कूल ऑफ लर्निंग LLC, शहरियार साहब थे फिजिक्स के और जाहिद वड़ाइद साहब थे केमिस्ट्री के, और आई डोंट नो बायो का कौन था, साइना थी, कौन था। So it reminds me of those days. I wanted to switch, but my father was very strict, and I'm glad I didn't switch because. लेकिन बहरहाल ISL का मुख्तलिफ मामला है, देखिए क्या बनता है. It's a risk for those who have switched, and I've heard that even the principal of Phase 5 switched.
Yes, actually principal को ले जाने वाले सर अली थे, who was the one chemistry sir.
Wow.
तो इसलिए
he's quite a celebrity. I mean, for a teacher to convince,
yes.
you know, a principal. I mean, pretty. लेकिन वहाँ के principal तो कोई या कौन थे? Male. I've seen the videos. I think he was a male, some male person.
Yes, male. Sir Shazad.
अच्छा तो principal भी नहीं आ गए आपके?
He studied from HSN और वो तो इसलिए ज़्यादा।
अच्छा तो principal आ गई आप लोग की नहीं, या फिर क्या सिलसिला?
अभी हमें पता ही नहीं सर कौन न्यू प्रिंसिपल है।
अच्छा, you don't even know who's the new principal. अच्छा तो मतलब your bio teacher has changed. इमरान ताहिर साहब छोड़ गए हैं?
यस वो बहुत सैड है क्योंकि अभी वो सिटी में पढ़ा रहे हैं अभी भी। आई डोंट नो उन्होंने एलजीएस छोड़ दिया।
हाँ सिटी में पढ़ा रहे हैं। आई हर्ड क्वाइट गुड स्टफ अबाउट हिम। आई मीन वो एग्जामिनर रह चुके हैं और
यस
आपके जितने
वो
भी
अच्छे सर हैं।
वो काफ़ी अच्छे हैं। आपके जितने भी क्लास फेलोज हैं उनसे मैंने काफ़ी तारीफें सुनी हैं। और फिजिक्स और केमिस्ट्री का क्या सिलसिला है एलजीएस में? अगेन दे आल्सो हैव बीन।
फिजिक्स की तो सेम ही है मेरे सर अब्दुल हकीम
अच्छा अब्दुल
एंड
हकीम
सर।
साहब हैं।
यस और सर अली ने छोड़ दिया सो अब वो एक और एचएसएम के कोई सर है सर नुमान ही इज गुड। लेकिन बायो की मैम अच्छी हैं
सर नो
लेकिन कभी कभार वो कुछ और भी पढ़ाने लग जाती हैं।
सर नोमान की ऑनलाइन ग्रिप बहुत अच्छी होगी बिकॉज ही वाज द वन हु पायनियर्ड ऑनलाइन ट्यूटरिंग इन पाकिस्तान.
यस ही इज गुड।
He's one of the oldest, so I'm sure कि you will. नोमान साहब अच्छे हैं. HSN से छोड़ के I think he must have left HSN if
तो
he's joined
इतने
us.
स्ट्रिक्ट भी नहीं है तो इसलिए अच्छे हैं।
अच्छा स्ट्रिक्ट नहीं है तो अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छी बात है. चले चले जी, बहरहाल हम शुरू करते हैं. अभी तक और पता नहीं आज कोई क्यों नहीं आया. So let's begin. So today's lesson is really important because it deals with resting membrane potential and action potential. Important क्यों है? तकरीबन I have went through 7 or 8 textbooks of bio और हर बुक में गंद मारा हुआ उन्होंने, खासतौर पे कैम्ब्रिज ए लेवल के पर्सपेक्टिव से. कोई डायग्राम नहीं है जो इसको क्लैरिफाई करती है. But there was one Cambridge workbook that I found. उसमें एक टेबल था जिसने इस सारे सिनेरियो को काफी क्लियर किया. So inshallah we are going to talk about that. So the diagram, so you can see that today I have a blank page. There's no PowerPoint presentation today. I'm going to draw all of the diagrams and I'm going to write all of the points for you today. I'm going to explain it with the diagram first. And then inshallah we're gonna look at the text. मुझे उम्मीद है कि आज ये दोनों similar topics हैं. They both are connected to one another. So today's lesson really demands कि आप काफी attentively होके बैठें. किसी भी time पे if you think that you don't understand anything, please stop me. Okay? So now the first thing that we have to study today is resting membrane potential. Now before I jump on to explain what exactly do I mean when I say resting membrane potential. Okay, let's set the context for understanding this topic. See, you have to understand that we are talking about nervous system. Okay, we are talking about nervous system, and we understand that in the nervous system we are talking about a specialized cell which is known as a neuron. Okay, and the neuron. Assalamu alaikum Zainab, are you here? Okay, she's here. So a neuron by definition is supposed to function basically it carries nerve impulses. ठीक है, लेकिन मैंने आपको कल बताया था कि nerve impulse is basically in the form, the more technical word is action potential. Okay, I mean in the crude words that you don't have to use in the exams कि nerve impulse जो है वो receptor से, यानी कि nerve impulse कैसे travel करती है, that's basically what we are supposed to see. Now, with regards to the neuron that we are going to see, I mean, let's consider a motor neuron, okay? And we have clearly seen yesterday how the structure of the motor neuron works. Now, with regards to the, okay, so these are the dendrites. So that's roughly what a neuron is supposed to look like. अब देखिए मैंने आपको कल बताया था for example the direction of nerve impulse maybe is something like this away from the cell body if that's the place where the effector is. Okay, that's the place where the effector is, and of course the other side is from where, that's the CNS. आपको पता है कि इसका जो cell body है, that space, the motor neuron cell body is placed within the CNS. Now what we are going to look at today is actually the journey of the nerve impulse from within the neuron, as in ये जो travel करती है ये कैसे करती है, that's basically what we are going to look at. And there's one more thing that you need to understand. I'm sure you remember the function of myelin sheath. Myelin sheath का क्या function है? Everybody knows कि it actually insulates. Iski analogy O levels mein, the analogy we used to give was just like, you know, the wires that you see, unke upar ird gird rubber ki wire hoti hai, that's basically just to ensure that it insulates. Now the nerve impulse, you need to understand, the nature of nerve impulse is not the flow of electrons. It's different from electricity. So I will have to go into slightly detail. अब मैं क्या करूँगा? I will basically magnify this portion for you. So let's suppose I am drawing, this is the phospholipid bilayer of the axon. ठीक है, that's the phospholipid bilayer of the axon. मैंने bilayer खुद ही draw नहीं की, single lines को मैंने represent कर दिया bilayer के साथ. Now for this particular neuron, you have to understand कि neuron के अंदर overall जो charge है, that is negative as compared to the outside, and this is basically talking from the perspective of the phospholipid bilayer. यानी कि usually this will not be the case with the other cells, लेकिन for neurons, the charge on the inside of the phospholipid bilayer overall will be negative as compared to the outside. Of course, there are reasons for this, and that is what we are going to discuss today. अंदर जो charge होता है उसकी value होती है -70 millivolts. Yes, you need to remember this. Okay, you need to remember this value. The inside of the phospholipid bilayer of the axon, okay, is basically its value is -70, and you call this thing as the resting membrane potential. Okay, and this value of -70 millivolts is which is known as, इसको हम abbreviate कर देते हैं RMP के साथ भी, resting membrane potential. This is when there is no nerve impulse. So when the nerve impulse is not flowing, when there is no action potential, this is the status of the charge inside the phospholipid bilayer and the outside. Okay? So the first topic that we are going to look at today is resting membrane potential. We are going to go into the whys and the hows, the reasons why you have a negative -70 millivolts inside the axon.
Sir, is this charge only inside the axon or overall on the axon?
मैं आपको बताता हूँ. देखिए, फर्ज करें if this is the phospholipid bilayer, okay? So if that's the phospholipid bilayer, okay? So on the inside of the axon, ठीक है, it is negative, all on the inside, ठीक है? यानी कि आप समझे cytoplasm की side पे, inside the cell, and on the outside it's positive. You understand? So was that your question? आपका question क्या था? If I'm answering that correctly?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है ना? It's all.
Sir, यही था ये समझ.
बस ठीक है. It's all on the inside of the phospholipid bilayer, and its value, you need to remember this value. This is -70 millivolts, and you call this thing as the resting membrane potential. Okay. The next thing that we will see is how is this resting membrane potential maintained. Okay. So I'm going to pose this as a question. How does a neuron maintain a resting membrane potential? Okay, so that's basically what we are going to understand. Let me show you a picture from the presentation that should make sense of all basically what I'm trying to explain. Ye dekhen zara, look at this diagram. Zainab, this is also going to clarify the confusion that you had. Dekhen, this diagram is a typical neuron. असल में ये एक GIF है, GIF फाइल है. मैं आपको इसको खोल के दिखाता हूँ. बल्कि पहले मैं आपको यहाँ पे explain करता हूँ, फिर मैं आपको पहले वो खोल के दिखाता हूँ. देखें, this is a typical. By the way, does this look like a motor neuron or a sensory neuron? What do you think? Sensory or motor?
Motor.
Sensory? Oh no, motor, I think.
Long axon है, cell body एक side पे है, ये dendrites हैं. This is a motor neuron. This is a typical motor neuron. Okay, so you can clearly see that they have. अगर मैं इतने से portion को आपको समझाऊं तो ये देखें. This thing is the phospholipid bilayer. Okay, and you can clearly see that on the inside it's negative and on the outside it's positive. Acha, just to give you a more bird's eye view, the negativity and the positivity is because of the ions. ठीक है? अब हमने जिन ions की बात करनी है इस topic में वो positive ions ही हैं, sodium ions and potassium ions. These are the two ions that we will be talking about. Now I have a question. If positive ions are the only ions that we are going to talk about, then how come we have a negative charge? क्या ख्याल है? What do you think? Let me repeat the question. If positive ions are the only ions that we are going to talk about, then how do we justify the existence of negative charge? Girls, it's a question. अच्छा चलें, मुझे पता है ये थोड़ा tough question है. Let me answer this for you. देखें, if I say that there are 20 sodium ions here and 10 potassium ions here, for example, and I say there are 3 sodium ions here and there are 2 sodium ions here, and that's, let's suppose that's the bilayer. अब मुझे आप ये बताएं, on both sides you have positive ions, but which side do you think, side A or side B, will be overall negative?
A.
Exactly, because lesser positive. Basically, मैं आपको बताना क्या चाह रहा हूँ. Lesser positive actually means negative in our case. Yeah, you understand this point. I mean, if there are less positive ions on one side as compared to the other side, which have more positive ions, then naturally, in comparison, we can say that the side that has lesser positive ions will give us an overall negative charge as compared to the other. Does this point make sense? ये जो मैंने आपको values दी हैं 20 और 10, ये सिर्फ supposedly values हैं. These are not the original values. I mean, I'm just giving an example. Don't consider this to be the example of the neuron. क्योंकि यहाँ पे yes, I mean that's generally an example. Okay. अब जब nerve impulse flow करती है, it's actually the flip of this charge. Let me show you this presentation in PowerPoint format. ये diagram दिखा के मैं वापस आता हूँ इस पे. Okay, so PowerPoint. Okay. Yes, I want you to look at this diagram. Can you see this flip of charge and therefore the arrow moving forward? This that you can see is basically the flow of nerve impulse in this direction. ठीक है? और ये flip of charge कैसे होता है ये हम बाद में देखेंगे. लेकिन at the moment, what I'm trying to explain is how is this particular charge, maintained on the inside negative and on the outside positive. ठीक है बच्चों? So I've just given you a big picture. Now let's dive into the reasons why we have negative charge on the inside and why do we have positive charge on the outside. Are we good so far?
Sir, is resting potential the difference of charge outside and inside?
Resting, पहली बात तो ये है, the word is resting membrane potential, okay? So we need to be careful about this. Resting membrane potential is the overall negative charge on the inside and its value is minus 70 millivolts, okay? असल में इसकी as such definition तो नहीं है, लेकिन I think if you want, I can give you sort of a definition if you like. Okay, I'll give you a definition for this. लिख लें ज़रा. Resting membrane potential is the potential difference across the membrane of the axon, across the membrane of the axon of a neuron at rest. At rest का क्या मतलब है? इस वक्त उस पे nerve impulse travel नहीं कर रही. Okay, that's what it means when I say it's at rest. And its value is normally, minus 70 millivolts. and we know that this negative charge is on the inside. Negative charge is on the inner side of the membrane of axon. ठीक है जी. अब definition में कभी भी नहीं पूछता, लेकिन just for the sake of your clarity and understanding, that's how usually it is defined. Okay. चलें जी. So if you're done noting this down, may I move ahead?
Yes, sir.
चलें जी. अब मैं आपके सामने axon की जो phospholipid bilayer है उसको जरा बड़ा करके डिटेल में ड्रॉ करूंगा, and I will show you the individual components that are basically there in this particular case. Okay, so all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a black color just to draw. Actually, let me draw the okay. So I'm going to use red ink first to draw the okay. अच्छा ये है जी आपके sodium potassium pumps. उसके बाद I'm going to use different inks. मैं आपको strongly encourage करूँगा कि if I'm using different inks, maybe you can use a pencil, maybe you can use a different color. Try and do that. Trust me, that will help you once you're doing your revisions. Okay. All right. उसके बाद we draw something like this with the red color. I'm going to make sure that I draw it as simple as I can so that all of you can draw it with me clearly. Okay, and then I'm going to use a different color for, let's say, purple for the others. Okay, and then I'm going to use all in all a different color for these guys here, and let's say yeah, I think we still haven't used the light green, so let's use the light green color. So okay, अच्छा जी, अब मैं basically let me draw the phospholipid bilayer. So this is something like this. Okay. All right. And this is something like this. Okay. Just for the sake of your clarity and understanding, I'm just going to draw some phospholipid molecules just to make sure that we understand that this is the phospholipid bilayer. Okay. Yep. Okay. So now let's move on to the labelings. Okay. अब आप देखें, I have drawn technically 3 different type of things. So this is a phospholipid bilayer of the axon. Let me label this with black. So this is the phospholipid bilayer of axon. Please don't lose track that we are basically now focusing on this particular area. और आप देखें कि मैंने नोड ऑफ रैनवीर वाली एक्सॉन की जगह को मैग्नीफाई किया है. I haven't magnified the area of the myelin sheath because all what I'm going to talk about is all what happens in the axon on the spot where there is the node of Ranvier, which means there's no myelin sheath here. Okay, so again, I'm going to reiterate this point once we're done with this topic. So that's the phospholipid bilayer. अच्छा जी, फिर जो आपको left side से शुरू हो जाए. Now all what I'm going to draw is basically familiar to you. It's nothing new. This thing that I have drawn here is actually the sodium potassium pump. Okay, and I hope you are crystal clear about the idea of the sodium and the potassium pump. Sodium potassium pump क्या करता है? What is, so basically you need to understand, we are trying to address this question: how does a neuron maintain a resting membrane potential? Okay, and we know by definition that the inside of this phospholipid bilayer is supposed to have this value minus 70 millivolts. We are trying to justify how does that happen. Okay, Acha ji. So number one, and I'm going to label this as number one just for your sake of clarity. So this is the first thing that we basically are talking about. Acha ji, what does a sodium potassium pump do? Yes, I'm asking a question. हाँ जी बच्चों बताएं जरा क्या, what do you think does a sodium potassium pump do? जब मैं आपसे क्वेश्चन पूछता हूँ और आपको ना आ रहा हो ना, तो आप शर्मिंदा मत होगे प्लीज. ओके, आई कैन लिटरली, I get vibes of sharmindagi at times. It's okay. I mean, if you don't know the answer, nobody knows the answer. Okay, खामोशी सबसे अच्छी. Okay, so do you want me to pick and choose, Rabia and Zainab? She's only two of you today. बच्चों मेरी आवाज आ रही है कि मेरी आवाज ही नहीं आ रही?
Sir, it pumps sodium and potassium.
Excellent, excellent. It pumps. अच्छा, कितने सोडियम, अच्छा बेसिकली सोडियम पोटेशियम अगर आपको याद हो, आपने बचपन में यानी कि एएस में पढ़ा था कि it actually pumps 3 sodium ions outside. 3 sodium ions out. And what was the other thing it did? If 3 sodiums are being pumped out, then 2 potassium ions are being pumped inside. Oops, I'm sorry. 2 potassium ions are being pumped inside. Okay? And since we are using the word pump, we naturally understand that basically this process will require ATP being hydrolyzed. Let me use it, let me draw it with a different color so that you can keep track of this. So, I mean, naturally we realize that this will involve ATP being hydrolyzed into adenosine diphosphate and a phosphate group. Okay. अच्छा, अब आप देखें कि there are 3 positive ions going outside and 2 positive potassium ions going inside. So tell me, what do you think will happen as a result of this action of sodium potassium pump to the overall charge distribution on the outside and on the inside? क्या ख्याल? देखें, 3 sodium ions are being pumped on the outside. So there are 3 positives, for example, on the outside and 2 positives on the inside. Which has lesser positive?
So the outside will be more positive.
Excellent.
And the inside would be less positive.
Okay. So you can see because of this action of sodium potassium pump, you have outside being more positive as compared to the inside. So sodium potassium pump is one of the reasons why you have resting membrane potential. ठीक है, अभी good so far? We've looked at one of the reasons why this happens. Okay, so let me write down the points for you. Okay, साथ साथ लिख लेते हैं ताकि हमें confusion ना हो. So the first thing that we need to know I'm going to use this space at the bottom to write this, so maybe you can take notes with me. The first thing that we need to know is, number one, the axon phospholipid bilayer is impermeable to sodium ions and potassium ions. क्या मतलब? इसका मतलब है they can't literally cross through the phospholipid bilayer. They need to enter through a protein, and we know that that protein is the sodium potassium pump. Okay, that this point is obviously understood, लेकिन ये marks scheme में as a separate point लिखा होता है. So what does the sodium potassium pump do? The sodium potassium pump it basically causes 3 sodium ions to move out of the cell, okay, and 2 potassium ions inside the cell. Through, I mean, of course, मैंने पहले mentioned कर दिया, that is through the sodium potassium pumps, okay, inside the cell, through the sodium potassium pumps, okay, and remember that sodium potassium pump, let me write this as a separate point. Sodium potassium pump is a transmembrane protein. Transmembrane protein क्या होती है? Transmembrane protein is a protein that spans all across the phospholipid bilayer. It's not a peripheral protein. It's not just on one side of the membrane. The sodium potassium pump is a transmembrane and globular protein. जी, globular protein क्या मतलब है? I'm sorry, I have to assess your AS all along because you never know. There are instances in paper 4 where the examiner can get, crazy and start talking about AS. Globular protein is a type of a protein, basically, which has hydrophilic stuff on the outside, a hydrophobic core on the inside. Okay? But abhi main us tangent mein nahi ja raha, that's something different. And all of this is happening by using active transport. Why? Because we understand that it's a pump, it will use energy which has come from active transport, and therefore the use of ATP. It's good that you always write down this equation whenever you are talking about this. So ATP is hydrolyzed into adenosine diphosphate and a phosphate group, okay? And since it's being pumped out, then of course it is being pumped against the concentration gradient. Okay, that's why we say that this is active transport. Okay, तो ये जो सारा कुछ मैंने आपको लिख के दिया है, this is one of the causes of resting membrane potential. Okay, and that is caused by the sodium potassium pumps. ठीक है बच्चों, are we good so far? Anything so far that you don't understand? Yes, girls. Are we good so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
चलें जी. Okay. आगे चलते हैं. आज मैं अपनी ट्रेडिशनल ब्रेक को थोड़ा सा 10 minutes extend कर रहा हूँ because I really don't want to break the flow. I just want you to pay attention, okay? Now, well, if you're done writing, now let's move ahead. अब जो diagram में मैंने आगे चीज draw की है, you can see 3 red things and 1 purple thing if you like. Now, the red thing on the diagram and the purple thing on the diagram is basically, let me label this with the same color that I drew this. अच्छा जी, ये जो चीज है इसको हम कहते हैं, this red thingy is the potassium ion channels. या फिर कुछ टेक्स्ट बुक्स इनको ion leak channels भी कहती हैं. I'm just writing that word in brackets so that you basically we know that what that is. All three of them are potassium ion channels. There's one thing that I want you to understand. If you miss the word ion and you just write potassium channel, you lose mark. Marking scheme में ion को उसने underline किया होता है. This word is underlined, so it's important for you to make sure you mention the full word. Okay. So I have drawn 3 of the potassium ion channels, and the other that you can see that I have drawn is, yep, this one. So this is the sodium ion channel. And again, some textbooks, they insist on calling this as the sodium ion leak channel. Whatever the case is, you have to make sure that you don't miss the word ion when you're writing about this particular protein. Okay, these channels hain. Channels, again, they are protein in nature. And okay, so I'm gonna shade the red ones like this just to make sure that they stand out further in comparison. So the nature of these leak channels is the same. And let me talk about them. What do I mean when I say leak channels? Okay. All right. Now, the reason I've drawn potassium 3 and sodium just 1 is because usually nahi, axon ke andar potassium ion leak channels are way more in number as compared to the sodium ion channels. So I've just drawn 3 just to make sure that you understand that this is representation of more number of ions. I'm going to write that down, inshallah, when I write the notes for this. Acha, ab mujhe aap ye bataएं that basically we understand that resting membrane potential, one of the reasons for that is the sodium potassium pump. Now, they are known as leak channels, and simply what happens is that the ions, that these ion channels, the respective ions, they simply diffuse down their concentration gradient through these ions. अब आप मुझे ये बताएं, where do you think, if you talk about potassium channels, so where do you think potassium ions will move? Now, where do you think potassium ions are more in concentration?
Outside the axon.
I'll give you a hint. Look at the sodium potassium pump. The sodium potassium pump is pumping 2 ions, potassium ions inside and 3 on the outside. So naturally, you have to understand that the concentration of sodium ions on the inside is comparatively higher in comparison to the concentration of the sodium ions on, potassium ions on
So
the outside.
you were saying sodium and you wrote potassium.
That's the slip of my tongue. The potassium ions concentration on the inside is higher as compared to the potassium ion concentration on the outside. Okay? So naturally, these 2 bubbles that I've drawn, it clearly indicates that there is an ion concentration gradient or simply a concentration gradient. But there is this word that we use for ions का अगर concentration gradient हो तो उसके लिए हम क्या word use करते हैं बच्चों? We use the following word. There is an electrochemical. Put your next on hold, please. I'm so sorry, girls. I think हमारा session end होने वाला है. Let's take a 1-minute traditional break. I'm going to end this meeting and please rejoin.